All right, hi everybody. So today we're going to jump straight into our first tutorial where I'm going to dive into creating a 3D text layer tracked over the top of live action footage. This is a really popular technique which is done a lot in title sequences, and hopefully after today it'll give you some other skills as well where you can adapt this technique into lots of other things. So this is also great for green screen, chroma keying effects, and things like that. So some of these skills can map across. So you'll have already seen what you can make from this tutorial through the little quick video I made earlier on. In this tutorial, we're going to cover some of those techniques, but ultimately it'll be up to you guys to create something, and I'm excited to see what you create, something different to what I've made. So when you first open up After Effects, you'll get something similar to this. Mine looks slightly different, but that's only because I've already been tinkering around with it earlier. So yours will be fairly blank. So what we're going to do first is right-click our project space here, go to Import, you then want to select File, and you want to find where you've downloaded that drone footage to in order to continue with this tutorial. So mine's already here. So once it pops up in here, you simply want to drag that video clip onto your new composition icon, and you can see I've got a few here already, which I'll just delete some of them so it makes life a bit easier. Okay, so down here you've got your drone footage, and at the moment it's 26 seconds long. You grab the cursor, you can scrub through the footage, and you'll see once it gets past 10 seconds it goes into a less interesting, if you like, scene, which is more about just gliding through that open space. So what you want to do whenever analysing live action footage is kind of find interesting looking bits that you can add your tracking to. So I think anything after 6 seconds it goes less interesting. So I'm just going to keep my cursor at 6 seconds. So what we're going to do now, the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is clip your footage so that you're working in a more manageable space. So After Effects is a very labour intensive program, and what that means is that if you've got a lower spec PC, it can be a bit jittery, it can take a long time to do things, it can be quite stressful. So we're going to look at some ways that you can manage how the computer performs while you're doing your After Effects work. And the first way to do that is by looking at this little icon here, which is like a lightning bolt in a square. And when you click on this, yours might say off final quality. If it does, just select fast draft. I find fast draft really kind of removes a lot of the extra things that After Effects does in the background. It creates a very pixelated video, because say this is HD. If you zoom in too much, it gets quite pixelated. If I turn this to off final quality, you'll see that a lot of that detail comes back. So we don't need that detail when we're working like this, because we are just using this for speed at the moment. The other thing you can also do is where it says full here, you can adjust this from half, third and a quarter, which again is just in reference to the resolution, and by doing that you'll see again we lose even more quality. We know the footage is already to a high quality, so turning down these settings literally is only affecting the image that you see as an editor and a compositor working on the scene. It isn't actually what the final output would look like. It is just a way of speeding up if your computer's a bit slow, like mine is today. Okay, so back to the tutorial. We have our footage. I've left my cursor at 6 seconds. The reason I'm going to do that is we're going to trim this area to that side. So to do that, we're going to grab this first grey bar, the work area bar, and as you hover your mouse near the blue end, it turns to a different icon. The moment it turns into that icon, just click and drag and hold shift, and as you get closer to your cursor, it's going to snap to it. Once it snaps to it, release everything. We're then going to right click here and select trim comp to work area. What this has done is it's now trimmed that video clip from 26 seconds to just the 6 seconds that we want to use it. Me recording the thing that I'm doing right now and it actually trying to work in After Effects. So you'll have to trust me on that. Hitting space will play through your footage. It's slightly working now. I will also try to cover a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'll try to say them out loud as I do them. So space will play your footage and that makes life easier. Okay, so we've got our footage. Now we want to get into the good stuff. So you can use your middle mouse button to scroll and zoom in and out. You can also select fit if you want to just see your screen filled up there as well. If you want to zoom out, you can just choose any of those settings that are lower than the percentage it gives you there. So the first thing we're going to do is type into your effects and presets 3D camera tracker. Now if you just type in 3DC, you'll see it pops up there, and you're going to drag and drop that onto your drone footage. While it says analyzing, it's got to analyze. It could take a couple of minutes. What this is going to do is it's After Effects using its own inbuilt algorithms to convert a 2D video that you see right here into a 3D space. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a moment. So here's my Blue Peter moment where I'm going to close this down, and here is the shot I prepared earlier with the 3D camera tracker already finished. So once it's finished, it's going to create all these little, I don't know if you can see them very well, but all these little marker and these, or we call them track points, and they should be throughout this video as you track through it, kind of like stuck to all of the stones and trees and everything like that stuck around them. So what we're going to do is use these markers and we're going to attach things to them, and that is the basic principle of 3D camera tracking. What we're doing is we've created a 3D algorithm on a 2D plane, and the computer is able to kind of work with that. This is a really powerful feature that was once upon a time, if we go back 10-15 years ago, reserved for very specialist software that stood alone to compositing softwares and things like that. So that's just an insight into how much technology has improved over the years. Now, if you can't see your markers, that's possibly because you've not selected the effect here in the effects control space. So if you can't see your markers, just click on 3D camera tracker, and voila, they pop back. So what we want to do is I'm going to try to follow a kind of look that I got earlier on. So I want to find a plane that's going to be covered by this rock later on. So this plane I've just selected here. Now what I mean by plane is it shows you this kind of target spot, and that's essentially going to be the platform the text sits on, the invisible floor, if you like. So I'm just going to right click here and create text and camera, and as you can see now my text has appeared, and if I just zoom back out again and press play, it should stay perfectly still, which it is. Now to tell if it is moving and wiggling around, you just have a look at the start point and the end point, and if it stays pretty much the same the whole way through, it doesn't matter if it moves slightly, the audience possibly won't notice it. Yeah, it should be fine. Okay, so our text layer is there, and I'm just going to rename the text while it's there to something completely random just for today's tutorial. And while we're here, I'm just going to press Ctrl A to select all of the text, or in this case it's not going to, so I'm just going to double click the text layer, make sure it's at 14, and I'm just going to choose Arial as a font because I know that that's I know exactly what to expect with Arial. It's not like New Times Roman. Okay, so back over to here. So on the left hand side in your sequence area, on top of your footage, you should now have your text layer, which is here, and your 3D camera, which is just going to stay there. It's not really important for today's tutorial, but it's good that it's there. You can move 3D camera tracks and all the rest of it, but it's easier to keep it there. So we're not going to touch that. So while we're here, over hello, we need to rotate this text so it's actually facing us. Now the keyboard shortcut with hello selected is R, and we want to just fiddle with the X, Y, and Z rotation. So X, Y, and Z rotation options will only pop up on layers that are 3D, and we know it's 3D by this little 3D cube, which is right here. If this was unchecked, you'll see that the whole effect is ruined, and we no longer have those X, Y, and Z rotations. So I'm just going to press Ctrl Z until I get back to where I was. And if Ctrl Z isn't working, it's saying it can't redo. The reason my computer is being like this is purely because I'm trying to do too many things on a fairly low spec computer. So apologies, computer. Jumping back to here. A lot of the times you should be allowed to undo things and stuff like that. Okay, so with our text layer selected, we're just going to adjust all these platforms until we get a we get a text layer which is pretty much how you would expect, and it is just now fine-tuning it so it looks level with all the rest of the plane that it's on. Try not to have it kind of like horizontally or like it's falling over something, just because it's a little bit unusual and the audience would be a bit confused. So okay, I think that looks pretty good. Again, we can fine-tune it later on. So like I was saying earlier, this is far too big, but it is only 14 pixels. So to address that now, we're going to make sure hello is still selected, or your text layer is still selected. We're going to hit S on the keyboard, and that's going to bring up our scale. And I'm just going to readjust this to 4000, so it's, oh, apologies, just banged my microphone. So it's a little bit more manageable. So now when we press space, we should be able to get a lovely hello appearing. Now we're going to get onto the more advanced stuff. So that's fairly simple. It didn't take us long at all, and it already looks pretty damn good. However, we're not happy because it's behind in 3D space, this rock right here, but this rock is not being our friend, and at this point this is where you have to kind of really get into sort of the composition and compositing element to it. So After Effects knows about 3D space, but it can't replace 3D objects behind other 3D objects. It can only create the 3D tracking point. So it's up to us now to fine-tune this and make it really sell the effect. So to do that, we've got to understand how plates work and layers work. So our bottom layer is the layer that's 3D tracked. What we're going to do is click on that bottom layer, the actual video footage, and we're going to hit Control D. Control D will duplicate that layer. And if it doesn't duplicate that layer, don't worry too much. Just go back to the shot, the original shot, and drag it in. Now yours, Control D, should duplicate. I think this is playing up because it's struggling with life at the moment, trying to record the screen and do all these effects. Okay, so now when we press play, you'll notice that our effect has gone, our text disappeared. The reason for that is because I've dragged that drone footage right back on top of all of our things, and After Effects works in a layer. Whatever's on top is most visible. So what we're going to do now is create a mask, and we're going to draw around this rock because that's all we're wanting to mask out as our text lies behind it. So to do this, we have to make sure that the top video footage, the top drone footage, is selected. We're then going to go over to the pen tool, which you might recognize from Photoshop and Illustrator and things like that. This works the exact same way, and we're going to draw around the shape of this rock. Now if you click and click and click, you're just going to draw straight lines. If you want to create a curve, on the next click I'm going to click, hold it, and drag to bring out those handles. And on the next clicks, I'm just going to make these nice and jagged. Now we are working with a rock. Rocks are typically jagged edged, so we can get away with mostly straight lines for this. So I'm just going to drag a very crude shape, create a very crude shape. And as you can see, those fine-eyed amongst you will have noticed that this edge is not the greatest edge. So what I'm going to do, sorry, I pressed space by accident, is just create another, no, I can't undo. Okay, if ever this happens to you, there's always a solution. After Effects, just hit M and it'll bring up both masks. I'm just going to delete that second mask I created. Oh, apologies. Note to self, clicking harder does not mean that the software will work in your favor. Okay, so where it says plus, it's now created me another point. And After Effects loves to test your patience, so never fall out with it, as frustrating as it can be. We'd never want to fall out with the software, but I am going to in a second. There we go, it's worked. Okay, so we've drawn around our shape. And now what we're going to do, what I'm going to show you how to do next, is do some animation. So in order for this to actually stay there, we now need to animate it, because if we go back to here, you'll notice the path of this mask that we've just created doesn't move with it. It's just fixed in the point and time that we first created it. So what we're going to do, and I'll just take this back to here because this is probably where you still are. What we're going to do is hit M on the keyboard with that layer selected. That's then going to bring up the shortcuts for this mask. And you know which masks you're working with because the colour of this little area here should match the colour of the mask. And what we're going to do then is click on this stopwatch. The moment you click on this stopwatch, it's going to do what's called creating a keyframe. And keyframes are these little diamond shapes that you can see here. What we've done now is told After Effects at the beginning of our timeline, we would like this path to be right here in space. Now, if we click here, it's going to jump along and you can see immediately our path is in the wrong place. So now what we're going to do is grab our path and just move it back. And unfortunately at this point what we're going to have to do is move all of the shapes with it. So to do that we're just going to click away and we're going to grab our points that we made earlier and we're just going to make a lovely shape back around this rock. Now depending on, and this is where it's easier if you haven't made as many mask points like I have earlier, because obviously the more points you've got, the harder this becomes. Okay, now I'm going to do this really rough and fast just because of I want this tutorial to not be too long. What I'd advise you to do is really spend a little bit of time with this. Now what we should be able to do now, then the next technique I'm going to tell you about will also save you time. Try to avoid, and it can be very tempting to go through this footage frame by frame and adjust your mask frame by frame. You shouldn't need to do that. After Effects is quite clever. You can go halfway through your sequence, then do it again, and then go near the end of your sequence and then finish it off. And what After Effects should do at that point is be able to get the path near enough correct. So if I just match this back up to here, you'll see what I mean in just a second. So all we've done is created 3 mask paths. If ever you want to get rid of this so you can see how your video is looking, just click on this button here. Now when we press play, we can see as it gets to there, it's looking pretty good. We don't really need to do much, and that's what I'm saying earlier on. After Effects should be able to work out the speed of things. As we keep going through it, there is a bit of an issue there. There's a few glitches happening. Now that could just be, it's definitely just happening immediately after that. So what we could do at this point is go halfway in between those 2 keyframes and grab our mask path once more and make sure you turn that back on if you've turned it off, and we're just going to grab that and move it back over here. Okay, and then we're going to go back to there again and we're just going to see how this turns out. Slightly better. It's still giving us a bit of grief. Oh, that's because it's gone over there. Right. So basically, this is how you want to conduct yourself, and just create as many points as is needed. But essentially, what we're doing now is just creating the illusion of depth through masking over the top of the same footage from earlier on. So what you've learned how to do there is also do some very basic principle animation. So from the beginning, it looks like this. Also remember, we're zoomed right in, and really if we go back to fit, this is how it looks. So little bits the audience will, you'll get away with if there's we wouldn't get away with this because as you can see here, the text is bleeding into the actual rock, which would become a little bit distracting. And now we need to get rid of the mask because it is eating our text. So once you get this technique sort of cracked, if you like, you'll find that this becomes a lot easier. And that is essentially all I did earlier on with my earlier tutorial, or my earlier piece that I created. And I just themed the text to kind of match what the image we were seeing was kind of suggesting. So something about rivers and forests. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of this tutorial. make sure that you refine yours a lot more as you're going through it, but the simple principles are there. You create your masks. If you wanted to, you could mask around this. You could add more things. You could add texts behind the tree line and things like that. That gets a lot more intricate, especially when you're trying to mask around leaves and branches and things like that. But what you could do with this technique, with this scene, is really quite endless. So have fun with it and just get used to these techniques, which you'll be seeing more and more throughout the course of your training. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the tutorial.